Go ahead and Yes, we are honored to have as our speaker this afternoon, F. Manjewa Mwangi, a full-time lecturer at Pwani University and director of ACK Diocese of Mombasa Research Institute in Kenya. He holds a PhD in religious studies, and I'm going to share screen before turning it over so that, and he is going to be lecturing us today on an examination of the barriers and enablers in missional leadership, the case of the Kenyan coast. And I'm going to put that on show, and please begin, Manjewa, go ahead. Are you there, Manjewa? Can you hear me? Are you muted?
No, he's unmuted.
No, he doesn't look muted. We can't hear you, Manjewa. Manjewa, can you hear us? So I can't tell it doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
Manjewa, we can't hear you. Are you muted, or is there an issue with your mic?
Did you hear him before?
Yeah, we spoke. Is he speaking? Can you see?
I can't see.
Yeah, it's not showing.
So I'm gonna stop share for a second. I'm gonna just look at participants.
Maybe if we get a couple of cans. It's a little sure.
Be unmuted.
He's now, oh, there he is.
Yeah, he's still. Go ahead and speak, Manjewa, as soon as you can. I'm gonna stop the recording. There's the recording.
I apologize. I apologize to everybody for this inconvenience. It is actually, it was out of my ability. I'm very sorry for that.
That's not a problem. Go ahead and begin your lecture.
Oh, thank you so much, Doctor. First, I'd like to greet all of you. Good afternoon. My name is Ferdinand Manjewa Mwangi, and I'm actually talking to you from Kenya, a small university known as Pwani. It's a public institution. And the lecture actually concerns a project we have been doing with Oscar and Laena. Oscar was just been trying to communicate with me, as he was also trying to communicate with you. And it's part of the larger program, a larger research project, which is run or directed by Dr. Kirk Franklin and Susan Veinen. So this research, or rather the paper itself, which is based on the research, is an examination of the barriers and enablers in missional leadership, the case of Kenyan coast. This lecture has, this project has two parts. This is part one, and there'll be a part two. So the part one in this paper is simply trying to look at how the three of us, three researchers from different cultural orientation, came together for a common missional task. Yeah, the second part will be a paper, which of course, God willing, we are going to present it next week, the same time and the same place, and hoping we'll not have all these other difficulties. So to proceed on, expounding on how the three researchers from different cultural orientation could come together for a common missional task, I will give a brief background, after which then I will, of course, go ahead and discuss other key stakeholders and so on. So to the background, there's three issues that we have in mind. The first aspect of the background concerns the Oxford Center Montagu lectures. These are the lectures that inspired me. In April 2020, as I was pursuing a 2-year postdoctoral research fellowship at the University of Pretoria in South Africa, I received an email from Rachel McIntyre inviting me to an online Montagu lecture series. After attending a number of these lectures for a while I was in South Africa, I was drawn to this lecture series by the way the moderator, the speaker, and the participants shared the experiences that related to church missions. Then I felt, within myself, here is another interesting field of research that could empower the church in its missional enterprise. But with that then came the question, how am I going to accomplish this dream? So the second part that influenced this research, the background to it, is the Diocese Research Unit. Although at the back of my mind, I had this idea of working together with a team of 11 members of the Anglican Diocese of Mombasa Research Unit to realize this dream. But at the same time, I was not convinced that this group had the expertise and the experience which could help to, to bring out this dream. So in 2018, with this DRU group, we had actually done a research among the Digo people in the south coast of Kenya as a project for the diocese of the Anglican Diocese of Mombasa. And in this research, we were actually trying to find out how early European Christian missionaries in the Kenyan coast were received by the local people. This research culminated into an edited book entitled The Digo Mission of the Anglican Church of Kenya, Essays in commemoration of 114 years of mission work in Kwale County. And the book is of course published by First Fruit Press, is a publishing firm of Asbury Theological Seminary in the USA. However, although I had the idea of working with the DRU researchers to realize this dream, as I've already said, although we had done this earlier research with them, I was aware that the kind of work which is required at the Montagu lecture series required people who are academically better qualified than the Diocese Research Unit members. So with that in mind, I still continue to search for more. The other aspect of the background is the advent of COVID-19. While still wondering whom I could team up to undertake research in church missions, COVID-19 visited the earth in 2019, as we all know. And everybody at this time was increasingly becoming aware of the need to be closer to God. So praying and fasting was so crucial for my survival, especially now that I was in a foreign land in South Africa. But also the inhuman application of the COVID-19 rules in Kenya to the people who are returning from abroad. This compelled me to remain in South Africa rather than to decide to come back to Kenya. So with this resolve, then I also found myself praying and fasting for God to open doors for me to get involved in the research related to church missions. Although I had been exposed to the discipline of church mission during my undergraduate degree and my postgraduate studies in the master's, as well as in the PhD, but I had never done any research in the area of church mission. to the level to the level that I would really say this is a research work. So this I felt was a gap of knowledge that needed to be attended properly. So to make the long story short, the door to make this desire began to open when through online Zoom meetings, I met Dr. Kirk Franklin, Dr. Susan Veinen, Dr. Laena Maunula, and Oscar Sui, sorry. I'm sorry, I keep mispronouncing that name. So those 4 people, they became very important in my desire to meet this dream for doing research which is related to church missions. So having given that background, then I want now to move to the other key stakeholders. And this is going to be the next step.
Oh, he got frozen.
Okay, let's see if he can come back. I think I need to have him turn off his video. There he goes. Manjewa, can you hear us? He's getting on, coming back home.
Oh,
I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
I was kicked off, I'm sorry. Yeah, so we are moving to the second part after the background, and this one I've entitled Other Key Stakeholders. So here I want to talk about Oxford Center for Mission Studies and Kirk Susan as well as DRU. In April 2021, Dr. Kirk Franklin and Dr. Susan Veinen called for an online meeting to discuss the subject of missional leadership project. In this meeting, 9 people from different parts of the world came together under the leadership of Susan and Kirk to listen to the presentation on global missional leadership that was delivered by Kirk. Kirk's talk informed group discussions and plenary sessions that followed after that. And then what followed after this meeting was for everyone to complete a questionnaire on global missional leadership. On my part, I shared this questionnaire with the 9 members of the DRU that is back at home. And these members are, of course, Kapinde, Chidongo, Mwoki, Mwangi, Murutu, Mjama, Ngumbao, and Samboja. And each one of them attended to the questionnaire. The other people who joined the desk and research unit later, of course, they are Evelyn Kombe, Evans Onyango, and David Kimeo. So after compiling these responses and consolidated them into one document, which then I submitted to Susan. So the next thing I want to talk about is how Laena comes into the picture. And then also alongside that, I want to briefly highlight on the generation of the research proposal. On the 25th of August 2021, a follow-up online meeting was called by Kirk and Susan. Something very important happened that provided the birth pangs of the missional leadership in Kenya research project. Laena Maunula presented a report entitled Questionnaire Results Summary, Missional Leadership Research Forum. Laena's presentation was the focus of discussion in this meeting because she critically analyzed the questionnaires from different parts of the world to present global perception on missional leadership. So key phrase that characterized Laena's findings that could influence the focus of the missional leadership in Kenya project, for which I and Oscar would come together and work alongside, is the concept of barriers and enablers to missional leadership. So to wind up the discussion of this meeting, Kirk and Susan encouraged us to consider working in groups to develop proposals for topics concerning global missional leadership research projects. The next meeting for Oxford Center for Mission group under the leadership of Kirk and Susan was actually scheduled for Monday, 22nd November 2021. Between August and November 2021, I and Laena had a series of online meetings discussing how we could team up together to draft a research proposal on missional leadership project. So we came up with the topic, missional leadership in Kenya, which of course the acronym is MILK, M-I-L-K. We agreed that we shall involve the 9 members of the Diocese and Research Unit in this project. While the DRU could help in collecting the field data, Laena and I would provide leadership. Laena and I drafted a proposal which had 2 central aims, and these 2 aims are: A, one was to identify and explore barriers and enablers of missional leadership development in Kenya, with a specific focus on the Diocese and Research Unit. The second aim, or the second phase, was to build research capacity within the Diocese and Research Unit group by training these members in the theory and practice of qualitative interview design, data collection, and analysis. Yeah, so now I want to move on and talk about Oscar, when Oscar now joins the group. The meeting for 22nd November 2021 could not take place, and instead it was rescheduled by Susan and Kirk for 6th December 2021. But before this meeting took place, it was preceded by one important event. Oscar Sue joined us upon our request when I and Laena approached him. So now the MILK team research project acquired a leadership team of 3: Laena, Maunula, Manjewa, and Oscar Sue. In this leadership, people whose thinking is primarily shaped by 3 cultures, that is Canadian, because we have Laena, African, because Manjewa is part of it, and Oscar, who is a Chinese. These cultures blended together for a common missional enterprise. Furthermore, we also come from different denominational background that blends 3 Christian cultural perspectives. We have the Mennonite, where Laena belongs, Methodist, where Oscar belongs, and the Anglican, that is where I, Manjewa, belong. So equally important is our different academic disciplines that blends together 3 expertise perspectives. We have a perspective of public health, which is actually Laena's expertise. We have practical theology, which is actually Oscar's expertise. We also have religious expertise, which is, of course, my area. So this collective expertise background shaped the prism or the lens for collecting and analyzing data. In other words, each of us had a slightly different skill and perspective that has enriched the experience as we learn from one another. So at this point, I would want to bring Laena's reflection of how we came together. And it is interesting, you know, to hear Laena's reflection on how it all worked together as 3 people in different cultural contexts came together for a common cause. This is what Laena says. For me, it has been so interesting to see the 3 of us, all coming from very polite cultures, interact with each other very gently and respectfully. It has been almost humorous at times when we each have points we wanted to make, but we would wait for the other person to begin speaking first out of politeness. Of course, when all three people in a conversation are waiting for the other person to speak, it can take a while to get anything, to get everyone talking. Three polite cultures trying to out polite the other. There have also been a few times when we had different expectation of which person should handle which task. Laena continues to give a reflection. We also had some differences of opinion around how aspects of data collection and analysis could be done. This was done in part of three of us. This was due in part to three of us coming from different disciplinary backgrounds, in which certain methods and traditions prevail over others, and also because of slightly different goals for the research due to our different career aspirations. Of course, having the three of us in different time zones and experiencing internet difficulties, I want to put that in brackets, as we have had today, made our meetings even more challenging. However, the three of us were committed to working side by side in this work. We had many conversations where listening, asking questions, patience, and referring to one another helped us to keep moving forward. That is the end of Laena's reflection. So the other thing I want to highlight that relates to how we came together concerns some sources. After the Oxford Center for Mission online meeting held on the 6th of December, the three of us held a series of online meetings discussing the practical aspect of undertaking this research project. In these meetings, we would also share general life experiences that involved family issues, church-related issues, a bit of politics, a bit of cultural and theological concerns. Those are some of the issues that formed part of our open discussion. During one of these online meetings, Oscar shared with us two important sources for missions. One is the Richard Osmer book, Practical Theology, an Introduction, published in 2008. The other book that Oscar shared with us is John Swinton and Harriet Mowat, a book published by the two, entitled Practical Theology and Qualitative Research, published in 2006. This, of course, reminds me of other sources that had been shared earlier by Kirk and Susan, which have also contributed towards our understanding of missional leadership. Kirk and Franklin published a book known as Toward Global Missional Leadership, a journey through leadership paradigm shifts in the mission of God. They published this book in 2017. This is one of the books that Kirk shared to all of us. The other one is an article published by Susan Van Benen and Cornelius Nimandi, entitled "Leading in the Certainty of Uncertain Times." It's published in HTS Theological Journal, 2020. So those are some of the few sources that I can say they somehow also shaped our thinking. There could be more other sources. So finally, I want to talk about how we did collect our data, the data collection process. In the following years, in the period of January to April 2022, the three of us, I, Laena, and Oscar, devoted ourselves to deliberating on the structure and the writing up of an interview guide for collecting the data and submitting our proposal to Oxford Center for Mission Studies for ethics clearance. After ethics clearance in the period of May to July 2022, we embarked on a serious task of collecting data through a series of interviews with the members of the Diocese and Search Unit. In this task of collecting data, which we shared among the three of us, while I organized the Diocese and Research Unit members to participate in interviews, Laena and Oscar conducted the interviews using audio clips. These interviews have provided the oral sources for a paper that we shall collectively present as part of Montagu lectures in a week's time, that is 30th of this month. This presentation, the one that we have now, marks the accomplishment of the first goal of the milk research project, which was to identify barriers and enable us to missional leadership development in Kenya. One of the other outcomes of the first phase of the milk accomplished by Laena is the drafting of a syllabus for training Diocese and Research Unit members as part of the second phase of the milk project. In other words, in the second phase of the milk project, we have this goal of training the Diocese and Research Unit members, and Laena has already produced a syllabus for that purpose. So this brings me to the end of this paper, and I apologize for any inconveniences, and I believe in future we shall rectify any inconvenience caused by the connectivity problems. Thank you for your patience and for listening.
Thank you. Let's put our hands together, Maunula.
Thank you.
Thank you, Manjewa. And it sounds like a really important project, and so good to see this going on, and also the kind of collaboration that you've had. And just a quick question. In terms of your interviews, how many people did you interview?
Yeah, thank you for that question. We actually interviewed a total of 11 people, sorry. We interviewed 11 people who are actually members of the Diocese and Research Unit, and they come from different denominations, although the Diocese and Research Unit is under the leadership of the Diocese of Mombasa.
Now, are you still crunching the data, or do you have any preliminary findings?
From this research, we have collected the data, and we have actually written a first paper from these findings, which is the paper that we're going to present on the 30th of this month. Yeah, okay. So we already have some findings.
So this is the study, and we'll learn more about the findings. Now, for anyone who wants to ask a question, if you're online, go down to the bottom and there's a reactions button. And if you push that, then it'll say raise hand. And if I see your raised hand, I will call on you on any questions or comments that you might have. And also here I will turn. Any questions or comments or any kind of interaction with Manjewa? Please, Marjorie.
Yes, hi, I'm Marjorie. Thank you so much for your presentation, and I hope to be able to join next week as well to hear what your findings were. My question is just a curiosity. Can you tell me a little bit more about what is the situation that compelled you to take this research? Meaning, what was the question? What's happening on the ground there in Kenya that leads you to say, oh, we need to do some research to understand the problem or situation better?
Thank you, Marjorie, for that question. I hope I've pronounced your name correctly. If I miss it, please forgive me. It's not deliberate. Yeah, and before I answer your question, I would like also to bring in the greetings of Laena. Laena was going to be with us, but she was caught up with some work at the place where she's working. I think she's in Canada. She just got a new job, so she has sent her apology. I hope you receive them. Yeah, so the situation which compelled us, the situation on the ground that compelled us to come up with this kind of a research. I can say there are two answers to it which are related to one another. In 2018, when I completed my PhD from the University of Cape Town in South Africa, and I reported back to the diocese. Of course, I teach at the university, but also I'm ordained in the Anglican Church of Kenya, Diocese of Mombasa. The bishop of the diocese asked me to help him to set up a research project. And with that, then we came up with the 11 DRU members, Diocese Research Unit members. So one of the issues that the bishop had in mind, which I agree with him, why he should have a Diocese Research Unit, is he was saying that so far the church has been receiving preaching from the pulpit, and much has been done in that area and continues to be done. But there is little that has been done in terms of research, which can inform current practices, and especially in the mission of the church. We already have missions that have been done by earlier missionaries, but there's also a gap that they have not covered in terms of the oral narratives, how people understand the mission today. So then he said it is very important that we have this research unit which can help us to address different issues that are coming from within the area where the diocese is situated. So with that, then we went ahead. Up to, at this point, we have actually established the Diocese Research Institute. We are calling it Diocese of Mombasa Research Institute. It has also a council. Its council is an oversight board, which is actually headed by a former vice chancellor of one of the universities here in Kenya. So that sort of created the curiosity for research, that there's something quite, I mean, there's a need for church ministry in the current time to be informed by research. And I asked the bishop, what example do you have that would illustrate your point? He told me, you know, currently as a bishop, I have, I'm leading a big group of pastors or parish ministers. And one of the challenging issues is the Anglican constitution that we have now does not answer to all the questions that they are facing in the society there. For example, I wanted to find out how they can engage in a kind of a leadership which enables the church to be more effective in this social cultural context in the current time, and that is not really explained in the diocese, in the diocese constitution. The second situational concern was when we had already formed this group, the Diocese Research Unit. We came up with a strategic plan. Of course, the strategic plan is now being reviewed by the members of the council. And in this strategic plan, one of the issues, again, which we were looking at was to find time to prepare the ministers to be effective in doing their missional work within the coastal area. So when Dr. Kirk Franklin came up with this idea of missional leadership, it quickly enabled me to connect with the Diocese Research Unit, strategic plan. And when I shared the idea with the members of the Diocese Research Unit, I mean the topic, they were really interested in it. And when now the interviews were being conducted by Oscar and Laena, I could actually see and hear the enthusiasm which was coming out from them, the way they were answering the questions from the interview guide. To me, that was like a measuring tool of the really the importance of this research in the current situation. Yeah, I don't know whether I've answered your question, Majori.
That's great, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I've got a question for you, Manjewa. It
Yes,
would
sir.
seem to me that when you talk about hindrances or catalysts to mission leadership, you only talk to leaders. There's people on the ground who might go, well, if the bishop would, do this and this, it might work. Maybe if he came into our township, he might learn something, but he's always in his big house up the hill. Right? So why did you just select leaders in that kind of narrow group of 11 people? Why not lay people and other people in terms of the church?
Oh, thank you, Paul. Yeah, we have the lay people in mind, but the plan that we want to put into place is to train the current leaders of the church who have had some initial training for their ministry, and then through them, because after we've trained them, then they will go and of course attempt to find how they could bring on board, how they can use the skill themselves, of course, to address, to find to sort of find the challenges that are there to missional leadership. And with that, we thought maybe the lay people, the need for the lay people could come at that point. And if it happens to come, then we will not need to be the ones that train them, but these people whom we have trained, we thought if they will have a grasp the skill, then they're the ones who would train the lay people. Yeah.
Okay. Any questions? Someone here first. Yeah, John.
Thank you very much, Dr. Manjewa.
Thank you, sir.
When you started with some kind of rough understanding that there were, I'm really following up Marjorie's question, some rough understanding of the issues around missional leadership.
Yeah.
Am I right? Some rough understanding.
Yes,
And
please.
the purpose of the research was to refine it, to test whether those were right, and maybe find out other issues that have been neglected.
Yeah.
Am I right so far?
Yes, sure. Yes, that, Prof.
Could you, without going into next week or whatever it is, next fortnight, next week, isn't it? Next week's lecture, can you give us some indication of what you thought were some of the problems that led you to start the research?
Yeah, thank you, Prof, for that question. One of the indicators for the need of this research, I would say, first, it's the need for doing research, collecting data and analyzing the information on the side of the members of the Diocese Research Unit. I realized that they are anxious to go and do some research because we already did the first research, which I mentioned up there in 2018. But this was really a rushed up work. But when I look at it, and when I look at their participation, I realized that, yes, they have the anxiety to participate in doing research for church mission, but at the same time, I realized they needed some skills for collecting data. They needed to be trained more. For example, when we went to do when we collected the data for that book, we used a focus group, and of course, the very few of them would ask questions that could help them to get some good information. They were not really, I would say, they were not really intense in asking the questions. And so I realized there was a need. So then I was asking myself, how am I going now to address to this need? But of course I knew they needed to be trained, but when it was going to be done and how. So Laena and Oscar came across and they had this desire also of training them. I said, wow, this is one area that would answer to that need. The other indicator I would say is we have in Mombasa, where we come from, for example, we have several cultures coming together. We have and also religious groups coming together. We have Christian denominations, we have Hindus, we have Muslims, we have then African traditional believers, and sometimes back, I remember there were questions that were raised by some of the clergy within the Anglican Diocese of Mombasa concerning how to address issues of African cultural practices, which they keep coming across when they are doing the ministry. For example, during the burial, this is a very specific example where that minister was saying, we have a situation where we are in a situation where we are burying a Christian who has died, but the relatives who are not necessarily strong followers of strong Christians, they are compelling us to give them the opportunity to do their traditional ritual, which is sacrificing the goat to the grave. And once that has been done, then the parish minister will be allowed now to go ahead and do the burial. So then those kind of observation, to me, they clearly indicate that there is need for a research which relates to church missional leadership, which empowers them to understand the context and to understand how to address those issues in terms, for example, of seeing the church as having the mandate, the mission of God, the mandate to execute the mission of God. And of course, it requires a little bit of doing research in terms of reading and doing research in terms of collecting the information systematically and presenting it in a coherent manner. So I'd say that is one of the indicators of the need for research in the church and in this particular context.
Thank you very much. That's really quite interesting, because now you will have to do some cultural theology.
Yeah, sure, Prof. Yeah, and that's why, Prof, you know, I value Oscar's place in our group. He has the practical theology at the tips of his finger, and he's the one who introduced at least to me. Laena may have had that you may have had exposure to it, but I didn't have a good exposure. But when he introduced these two books, I went and read them. I realized, it's time now for us to really focus on practical theology. And in fact, at the university here, I last semester, I introduced the idea to the department and asked them whether they can consider allowing us to write a syllabus for practical theology, but at the certificate level.
Very interesting. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Moenga. Al Cooper, unmute and ask your question.
Thank you so much, Dr. Manjewa. I speak as a bishop from the Anglican Church in Chile, La Iglesia Anglicana de Chile.
Thank you, Bishop.
Well, and I want to thank you because you have given me so many ideas for Chile right now.
Thank you, sir.
Like you, we have long transited from mission coming to us to now us doing mission. And it's become so varied. And we have, I mean, we even have had to develop online church planting, for instance, planting churches online and things that we would never have dreamt of. But I mean, a year ago, I planted a church in Brazil online with a mission planting guide. This morning, I was talking to Chile because they are going to Mendoza, Argentina. So the variety of mission that is now taking place out of our Anglican churches needs this sort of research. It's so interesting, so exciting to hear that. And probably I will hear you next week talk of this transition, but discovering also new ways in which mission is being expressed in Kenya that is new, that is groundbreaking, that has not been thought of before. Is that happening? I imagine you will tell us more next week. But I was in Rwanda not long ago, about a month ago, and saw there are many different ways missions taking place. I just wondered if you would comment to us and maybe give us some friendly advice to La Iglesia Anglicana de Chile.
Yeah, thank you, Bishop, for that observation and also requesting me to give a comment. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think you are very right, Bishop, that the Bishop of the Anglican Diocese of Mombasa and also the other leaders within the coastal area who are not Anglicans, they have realized that there is need for them to do a mission that, of course, involves some kind of research undertaking. Yeah, because research, when it's done properly, it will give comprehensive information. It will also involve people's reflection of how they see the reality, because how people see the reality is very important for the church to understand, so that they can be now in a position to answer questions that are really arising from the society. Yeah. So to the Chilean, under your leadership, Bishop, my advice, of course, to them is really to embrace the vision which you have, and also to team up with you, and then work together with the Oxford Center for Mission Studies, because I see Oxford Center for Mission Studies as a God-sent opportunity, so that through that, I'm sure you'll be empowered to see how you can address missional concerns of the church in the current time, particularly as they are relevant to the Chilean context. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Bishop.
Okay, let's go to you, Israel. Go ahead and unmute, ask your question.
Okay, Brother Manjewa,
Yes, sir.
it is a pleasure to meet you. I am a Peruvian, I don't know what to say, a pastor or researcher or teacher or something like that. I've been in Europe for many years, and I am a bit aware of the cultural differences between the different contexts and the challenges we have when it comes to research. And, and I would like to touch a little bit of that part of your position. And we're thinking about the limits of in your research frame are you aiming in a way to find barriers or enablers within the context of culture, spirituality, things that have to do with the system, the political systems within the church, for example, or you want to find a little bit of each? For example, is it difficult to get, for your research, is it difficult to gather diversity in the backgrounds of the informants? I mean, it's difficult, for example, the question of gender, to have women informants as well as men, or it is when it comes to get informants, interviews with people in the layman level and the hierarchical level of the church. Hierarchy is very strong in Kenya.
Yeah.
So maybe leaders will like them to be heard, and it would be difficult to hear the common people of the church. I just wonder, because I am not in Kenya. I don't know the history, much of the history of Kenya. So I was just wondering about it. Please.
Yeah, thank you, Brother Israel. Yeah, and those are very interesting and very critical observations on the limitation. Yeah, but what is happening for now, what we are doing with Laena and Oscar, is that we are looking at barriers and enablers to missional leadership. I'd say this being a first attempt, it's more on the general perspective. But what I've seen from, and thank you for asking this question, what I've actually seen from the audio, what I've heard from the audio clips, is that all these issues you have mentioned, they are actually popping up here and there from the 11 people that we interviewed. Issues of spirituality came on board, issues of systematic systems in terms of leadership, politics, also issues of gender came in, also the issue of hierarchy. And I think what you've done, Brother Israel, is to help us. I've already outlined the information you've given me, is really helping, is going to help us to see how we could actually go back to the same audio clips, because we have preserved them somewhere, and begin to address these issues. But what will come up to next week is going to be the general issues. Yeah, because we did not have the time, for example, to focus on the hierarchy or to focus on the gender alone. Yeah, the interview question was just general on missional leadership. Yeah, and sometimes, for example, we ask questions like, what are some of the challenges you have observed in your missional leadership? And one of the ladies was saying, well, in the context where I'm serving as a woman, when we go for evangelism, I see a lot of male chauvinism, in that some men, if I'm alone, they would not accept me to share the gospel with them, because in this area where we are, the culture of the people dictates that a woman should only be at the kitchen or should only be listening. And then she says, although when I go with other men and allow them to share, then these men would listen and I'd take my position to pray, and then my prayer will be acceptable. Yeah, so we could see some issues of gender coming out there. Yeah, so though for now the limits are so broad, but I'm sure after we've done this first presentation, the subsequent presentations, we will have to go back, and it's like now we are having a mining area. We go back and start mining and try to address these topics one after the other: spirituality, hierarchy, gender, and it's very interesting. Yeah. So in future, God willing, I'm sure we are going to address those issues. But thank you for the question, Brother Israel.
Thank you to you, dear brother.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I follow up on?
Yeah, please, Oscar, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So yeah, I think it's very interesting. You talked about the cultural aspects of barriers, and I think at least I think according to some of the respondents, the cultural barriers are often intertwined with other aspects like denominational barriers or social or economic or political barriers. And I'm very glad that Manjewa talked about gender issues. I remember one of the respondents said, as a woman, she's discouraged from taking a leadership role, largely because of cultural issues, but also because of certain denominational issues, very conservative, very patriotic. And also, she's discouraged from being a missional leader or an evangelist. So that also had a lot to do with the patriarchal society where she's brought up with. So I think we have indeed found certain cultural barriers, which we will share with you next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Oscar. Let me ask a question on that same line. I'm assuming that you're all from the Anglican tribe because of all these bishops. Is that true? Are you all Anglican in the study?
I'm Anglican, but Oscar is Methodist.
Yeah, but in terms of the study, everybody was an Anglican, right?
Those who were interviewed?
Yeah.
No, those who were interviewed, they were Anglicans. We also had a Baptist, and there was also an African Inland Church.
Okay, good. That would be very interesting to see. Now, what else was I going to ask about that? Yeah, it'll just be interesting to see those and the differences between the backgrounds and how they perceive barriers differently. But I think that's a really interesting part of the study. So yeah. So any other questions?
Yeah, sure, Paul. Yeah.
You talked about the how you formed the team and how you work collaboratively. Can I just ask you to expand a little bit more about some of the strengths and weaknesses of having a collaborative research team?
Oh, thank you so much. And I hope, Oscar, you are ready to chip in and help me, because, we are all together in this. So the question is on how the challenges that come with a multicultural collaborative team, like the one that we have now.
Strengths and
Strengths.
What were the challenges?
Strengths, weaknesses.
Okay, the weaknesses of a collaborative group like the one that we have now.
The strengths.
And the strengths.
Yeah. I think I would say the strength, one of the strengths is that if you can be patient enough, you get a lot from the other people, because they always have some strength. You can actually see it coming straight away from Oscar. When Israel asked the question, I could not answer it in detail as Oscar did. Oscar could easily outline the cultural barriers, patriarchal, and so on, and even give that example. So I'd say bringing people from different cultures, there's that kind of a strength where people would help you to see what you would not see, or would help you to explain something more clearly than if you are just people of the same culture. The weakness, I really can't see any weakness. I'm sorry, because so far I'm seeing all the strength from my side, unless Oscar would want to say something. But opportunities, I can say there are opportunities for opportunities for growing in patience.
Yeah, we think you should have invited some impolite cultures.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think well, the other strength is the other strength I can say is that there was we are learning, for example, some of us we are learning on how to be straight on point. Like this, you get it from Laena mostly. She goes straight to the point, and sometimes because of my own cultural background, you know, at times I tend to go round and round, but for her, she'll go straight to the point. So those are some of the things I'd say I'm learning. But patience, of course, is going to be demanded. You have to be patient, and you have also to trust that God is helping you to work it out as you continue to pray together. Yeah. I'm sorry if I did not answer the question properly.
Okay, can I say something on this?
Well, Oscar, then.
Thank you, Manjewa. You said that you interviewed 11 people, and Kenya is a kind of huge country with huge Christian population in many nations. How can you claim that your data and outcomes are trustworthy when you take only 11 interviews?
Sorry, please repeat the question.
How can you know the reliability in a nation as big as Kenya if you only have 11 interviewees?
Oh yes, thank you so much for that question. Yeah, looking at the issue of reliability, we have this aspect of the topic being as missional leadership in Kenya, and now we are beginning to look at the Kenyan context in terms of beginning with this small group of 11 people who come from different denominations. So for now, it is limited to that. But the topic, as it is, we are going to use it to also approach other people from within Kenya, like maybe Western Kenya. We maybe visit them in terms of the geographical location, hoping that in that geographical location we get different denominations, because our focus is really to be interdenominational. Yeah. So yeah, you're right. This is not really a full representation of the Kenyan population, which is around I think Christians. They could be over maybe 10 million. Yeah, but the approach that we're using, qualitative research method, in most cases, unlike quantitative, you only need a representative sample to work with. Yeah, so this is just a representative sample in terms of, but there is much that can be done. Yeah.
Oscar, did you want to add something?
Yeah, sorry, I think I wanted to add something to answer the previous question about the potential strengths and weakness of working collaboratively in such a project. I think I have discovered some of the other opportunities, I would say, because researchers can learn from perspectives from different disciplines. Because I'm more, my training is more in practical theology and ethics, while Manjewa was more in biblical studies and Laena is more in social science. So we often learn insights from different disciplines. Say in qualitative research, Laena would provide a lot of insights in terms of data collection and data security, how and the ethical consideration and sampling and things like that. And also, again, I think you can clearly see that Manjewa is from a very polite culture. and so that's, it's a very good cross-cultural exchange. And sometimes I would say, coming from another culture, sometimes it's easier for someone to see a particular contextual issue even more clearly, or because there's a critical distance. So I think, of course, that is a lot of dialogue and a lot of humbleness too, because we are not from Kenya. And I think humbleness is very important. And I remember a contextual theologian says it's possible for someone from another culture to contribute to contextual theology within a specific culture, but one should also be aware of his or her limitation. So I think humbleness comes first, and then but also be confident. And so I think that has to do with the weakness, or maybe not weakness, maybe potential challenges. Is there are quite a number of them. I would say one is, at least for me, I think one potential challenge would be understanding English with kind of Kenyan accents when I'm doing the interview. But my opportunity is when I was in Wesley House, we had a lot of African seminarians who spoke English. So, and actually many of them, they were from Kenya, as I shared with Manjewa. So I try very hard to build relationship with them and trying to understand where they're from, their culture. So I think that actually built up my competence in understanding the interviews. And I was actually the one conducting the interview. So I would say language would be one important challenge, including accents, not just about English, but it's also about accents, and also about trying to understand one another's cultural background, especially in relation to Kenyan culture, and not to mention about time zone differences, and also about technological challenges that might happen in Kenya. I mean, I remember when I was doing the interview, online interviews, there were technical challenges that happens sometimes. And I remember in one case we had to do it again because of technical issues. So I think that these are some of the challenges, I would say, for a research team that work closely, but among different people from different parts of the world. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you, Oscar.
Thank you.
Well, let's put our hands together and thank you for an absolutely fascinating.
Thank you.
Do the next installment next week, so we can look at some of the findings and what was learned in this good study. And just the blessings of this day to you and to you, Oscar. And we look forward to the next installment of this important series. So with that, I will say bye-bye and thank you all for attending.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.